Good morning. Thank you for attending our Indiana-Michigan Power webinar, The Best Step Forward, Energy Star Portfolio Manager. My name is Levi Sanchez, and I'm the host of today's webinar. Before we begin, we wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your screen are multiple application widgets you can use. All of the widgets are resizable and movable. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can submit them through the Q&A widget. We will try to answer these during the webcast, but if a fuller answer is needed or we run out of time, it will be answered later via email. Some networks cause slides to advance more slowly than others, so logging off of your VPN is recommended. If your slides are behind, pushing F5 on your keyboard will refresh the page. You can find additional answers to some common technical issues located in the webinar Tips and Help widget at the bottom of your screen. We will be conducting polls during the presentation and would appreciate your participation. Our first poll is open now, so take a moment to submit your answer. Please be aware that you are not the only participant today. The names of the other attendees are not being shown to you for your privacy. I'll now introduce today's presenters. First, Mike Carter is a senior engineer for the Questline service. Mike has a BS in engineering and an MBA degree from The Ohio State University. He has worked with various EPRI centers supporting electrotechnology applications and spent 10 years conducting due diligence for technology commercialization. At the Questline service, Mike writes articles for the newsletter, answers Ask an Expert inquiries, and develops webinars on energy topics. Jason Whitman is the Senior Energy Efficiency Program Coordinator for Indiana-Michigan Power's commercial and industrial customers in Michigan and has been in this role since May of 2016. He has a BS in Computer Information Systems from Colorado Christian University. Prior to joining the energy efficiency team, Jason worked at Indiana and Michigan's Cook Nuclear Power Plant for 5 years as an instrumentation and controls maintenance planner, and for 13 years in the U.S. Air Force, serving as a nuclear weapons launch officer and data and technology acquisition officer. And now I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mike, who will get things started for us today.
Well, thank you, Levi, and welcome everyone to our last in a series of 4 webinars we're conducting this summer. We covered in the last few months building automation systems. We looked at HVAC maintenance and electric vehicles. And today, I want to introduce you to a really valuable and free tool called Energy Star Portfolio Manager. Now, this tool does a lot of things, but its main core function is benchmarking. And what are we talking about there? Well, it's really the process for accounting for comparing a metered building's current energy performance, either with its own energy baseline over time, or comparing a metered building's energy performance with those of similar types of buildings, its own peer group, if you will. And a recent study found that commercial buildings that regularly benchmark their energy performance reduce energy bills by about 7% over 3 years. And you probably know that saving money in your energy bill obviously improves your bottom line. For instance, in commercial real estate, decreasing energy costs by 30% is equivalent to increasing net operating income by 4%. So we're going to walk through and look at some of the features of Portfolio Manager, and then I'm going to take you and just share my own journey of doing this, how to actually use the tool step by step, adding properties, meters, the energy data, kind of look at what kind of reports you can get. And we'll wrap up here just sharing some of the lessons learned, I think, that are important tips that will make your experience a lot easier than mine, and leave you with some additional resources to learn more about Energy Star Portfolio Manager. So what is Portfolio Manager? Well, it's certainly, with regard to energy management, a strategic way to manage your energy. It not only looks at energy savings, but also emissions as well. And so you're not only going to save money, but you'll protect the environment. You can also maybe use it as a tool for funding and grants. And of course, as I mentioned before, it's free and it's accessible at any time, 24/7, 365. Show some data here on just the offices segment. There's a lot of different segments. I'll show you what those are. But just for offices, the portfolio manager houses information on about 60,000 properties, several billion square foot. The average Energy Star score is about 63. So the average overall for offices out there is 50, and the score to get an Energy Star certification is 75. So you can see that there's room for improvement in most commercial offices anyway. So how does it work? Well, it basically benchmarks you and gives you a score, 1 to 100. And if you score 75 or higher, then you are eligible for Energy Star certification, something you have to apply for. Just as a point of reference, this Energy Star score is a prerequisite for leadership and energy and environmental design and the LEED program. In fact, 2009 version of LEED, it required a minimum score of 69, and the V4 latest version of LEED, it requires a score of 75. So you basically have to have Energy Star certification level performance to be a LEED certified building. It measures energy two different ways, site and source. Site, as you can see down this picture down on the lower right-hand portion, is the total amount of all the energy your building consumes on site. It's reported on your utility bills. It's just measured by your meters. Source energy, though, represents the total amount of raw fuel that's required to operate the building. So it incorporates all the transmission, delivery, and production losses. And it really, by taking all those energy uses into account, provides a little more complete assessment of energy efficiency in a building, particularly as it impacts the environment. The other thing that makes the portfolio manager really valuable is its automatic ability to normalize the data on your building energy data, not primarily on the weather, but it normalizes on how many employees and hours of operation, number of computers as well. In terms of weather, basically weather normalizing shows the total energy you would expect to use if the building weather conditions were the average or normal conditions for your location. For example, it answers the question, what would your energy use have been if you didn't have that record hot summer or an usually mild winter? So it's really a powerful data function within a portfolio manager that's automatically available to you as a user. What data source is used for benchmarking? Well, primarily it's something called the Commercial Building Energy Consumption Survey data. This data is something that's conducted on a regular basis over time by the Energy Information Administration of the Department of Energy. It's a random sample that's intended to be a representative data of buildings on a national level. It's whole building energy data, so it's pretty curated data in that regard. And so you might ask yourself, well, why does it use the data in Portfolio Manager? In other words, if you're an office, what about those 60,848 facilities that are already in Portfolio Manager? Well, it doesn't use that, and one of the reasons is there's 1 million offices in the U.S. Buildings, and so 60,848 isn't necessarily a large representation of that. The second thing is, you look at this plot of data here on the right. It's the average size of buildings that are in Portfolio Manager compared to the average size of buildings in the what we call the CBEX database I was referring to. And they're much bigger buildings. So it's skewed toward very large buildings, and so that's not going to be a fair representation of the average building you're building out there. Now, I said that it's primarily the CBEX for multifamily and I think also senior care. They use Fannie Mae industry survey data, and for hospitals, healthcare, they use American Society for Healthcare Engineering data. They feel that's better data than what's in the CBEX for comparison. What kind of facilities or property types are used in Portfolio Manager? Well, they're listed here. All property types can use Portfolio Manager to track energy consumption, and all property types can receive a score. But several property types are not eligible for Energy Star certification yet, although you can get a score. And I've listed those here in asterisk. Looks like barracks, for instance, medical offices, residence hall dormitories, and down below here, wastewater treatment plants would be some that you can get a score, you can track your data, but as of yet, they're not eligible for certification. The hope is that in the latest round here, at the 2015 point, using 2012 data, that they would be able to get enough robust data to allow certification. But I haven't seen that happen yet, so we're going to keep an eye out for that. I have a next poll question. What's your experience level with Portfolio Manager? Maybe you're not really even familiar with it. Maybe you've heard of it. You know what it does, but you never really used it. Or maybe you've used it, you received a score, or maybe you've not only received a score, but you did well enough that you applied for a certificate, or maybe you've even gone to the point where you even received a certificate. So if you can click one of those as the best representation of your experience level, we'd really like to know that, and I'll share that here in just a little bit with everyone, kind of see where we're at here today as a group. So while you're doing that, let me talk about what's driving benchmarking of buildings these days. Well, a lot of cities, those listed here, I think I can add Boston to that list, they've adopted the tool to collect data for mandatory benchmarking laws. So a lot of cities are starting to say, we're going to require that the buildings within our boundaries are benchmarked from an energy standpoint. And right now, more than 140,000 buildings have been benchmarked, and over within Portfolio Manager, and over all kinds, not just offices, and over 10,000 buildings have received a certification label. Now, not all buildings are eligible for certification or even scoring. They have to be, at least a certain size, greater than 5,000 square foot, unless you're a hospital and it's greater than 20,000 square foot. Have to be open at least 30 hours a week. Again, there's some exceptions there, and have at least one worker. And for office buildings, you can see here, this is a sample of the data, a number of properties versus their performance in terms of source, energy use intensity, thousands of BTUs per square foot, and it gives you the median, which is looks like 184 kBTU per square foot, the 95th percentile, and the 5th percentile. You can just see that there's quite a few buildings that are very poor energy performance. It kind of skews it a little bit. It'd be to the right, less efficient, and then they tend to congregate around that median point in terms of the more efficient. So the other aspect of Portfolio Manager is they have some great reporting and graphing features. We'll get into that here. This is just some data that I actually used on the building we were housed in here a couple years ago, and you can plot data over time, energy, or electric and gas. You see there'll be a Excel choice there that you can export data by calendar a month, and which I did there over several years of data. Pretty easy to use. I'll show you how to use that here in just a second. What's your familiarity level? Most of you have heard of it, haven't used it. Some of you actually have received a certification, at least on one property. So okay. And I think this is going to be pretty valuable for you to kind of look into under the hood, so to speak. So where do you start? Well, the first thing you need to do to use Portfolio Manager is to create an account. And it'll be pretty obvious when you open up Portfolio Manager where you do that. And basically, name, rank, and serial number. And you'll be coming back to your account over and over again as you use the tool and add properties, add meter data, that kind of a thing. So you create your account, and then you'll see there's 5 tabs. It says My Portfolio, Sharing, Planning, Reporting, and Recognition. And under the Start, My Portfolio, one of the next thing you have to do after creating an account is add a property. And so there's a little button there, doesn't jump out at you necessarily. There's a couple places actually here that's on here. And this page is a lot longer than this. I'll show you what happens once you get the properties in there. It changes a little bit, but you'll add a property. All right. And so to do that, you have to tell it what kind of what the primary function of your property is. What kind of property are you? And there's actually it's pretty. There's a lot of different options on here. And for instance, just an education. It could be adult education, university, K-12, etc. Same thing for public assembly. What kind of is that? Is it movie theater or a church or whatever? And you'll tell you what you are. I mean, I just chose that we were an office building. And then once you do that, it says what's your how many buildings do you have? And it could be one, which is my case. It could be more than one, or you could even be part of a larger building. And then what's your construction status? And I chose it's an existing building, but it could be you could be doing this for a design project or even just doing this as a test. And then you hit Get Started there at the bottom. Then it's going to want to know for that specific property some more detailed information about the building attributes. Where is it located? That's going to be very critical in terms of weather normalization, climate impact on your energy consumption. And then how old is it? What size is it? And what's the occupancy as a percentage of gross floor area? And then ask you a little bit more at the bottom about, hey, do any of these things apply in terms of energy? If there's any significant energy consumption in the parking areas, I have a data center in my facility, that kind of a thing. So it's trying to really get a handle on what kind of a building facility you have. And then down below, you'll see that it has that same data, but it has data for additional details like number of workers, number of computers, and the percent of the floor area that can be heated or cooled. And if you're not sure about exactly, for instance, I wasn't sure about how many computers do we actually have, you can just check that little box in the right-hand column that says temporary value and get back to it. That's an estimate. It'll still give you a score and everything. You'll have to make sure that's an actual value before you get a certification, but you can flag it just as, it's in the ballpark here, and I'll have to go dig up what that kind of information is before I finish up. And then again, of those, you'll see another set of tabs, or it'll default to this summary, and the summary basically shows a metric summary and what's your baseline, what's your current use. Well, there's nothing there because you haven't put that data in, and it tells you that data quality for this property. Unfortunately, you can't get any analysis because you haven't put anything in there. So to do that, you pick the Energy tab, and under the Energy tab, there's what you want to do next is add a meter. Now, there's buttons there that says enter your bills, but you can't enter bills unless you associate it with a meter, and so that's the next thing we really want to do. Before we go forward, though, look in the lower left-hand corner, and I'm going to get a little ahead of myself here, but this is where it was listed. It says 4 ways to enter your bill data. You can do it manually, line by line, month by month, off of an energy bill piece of paper or something. Or you could use a simple spreadsheet for one meter, one gas meter, one electric meter, one water meter, whatever. Or you could use a more complex spreadsheet. This is a template that Portfolio Manager supplies, and I'll show you an example of that here in a second. Or you could use a third party who has created what's called an API, Application Programming Interface, that would take your meter data from your utility and automatically put it into the system. And so what I'm going to show you today is what I did using this simple spreadsheet today, which probably for most of you that'll apply. And so once you say, okay, enter a meter, it'll ask you, well, what kind? And in my case, I wanted electric and gas. It could be propane, or it could be district hot water or steam or chilled water or whatever. And then how many meters do you have of these kind? And mine was a pretty simple case. I just had 1 meter for each. And then say, hey, get started with this. And then it kind of says, well, wait a minute. Just make sure, here's a summary of what you told us, that electric meter, gas meter, but do these account for the total energy consumption for this property? This is kind of like a double check. And why would they ask that? Well, because you might have some sub-meters out there, for instance. And so anyway, once you do that, you'll apply that, and you'll have lines here for each meter. I had just 2 lines, and you can need to tell it, okay, you come up with a name. You can name it whatever you want. I just call it a simple electric grid meter, a type, and then there's a pull down for units. And for instance, for electricity, you have several different ways of entering that depending on how your bill data does it. Most of us it'll be kilowatt hours, but if it's not, this is where you'll change it. You want to match the input source of, say, a spreadsheet data with the meter line here, and so then you hit create meters. So you might think you already have done that, but you really haven't. It kind of gives you a chance to set it up like this, and then formally you need to hit create meters. And once you get that meter data, if you look down below, there's a place that says upload data in bulk for this meter, and you can copy and paste into the table above, or and it would be blank before I do this. I'm just showing you after I uploaded it what it looks like. Or you can use this template, spreadsheet template. And that's what I chose. I just clicked on that underlined in blue spreadsheet template link, and it opened up a template. And the template looks like this. Pretty simple, just about 5 columns. Start date, end date, what's your usage, in my case kilowatt hours, what's your cost. It's really nice to have that data, so make sure that your utility includes that, what you paid for it, and then estimated value, which I haven't found to be very useful. And then I showed you the utility bill down below, and some of the, of course, challenges are that, the column titles for my utility bill don't match the template. And that's okay. You just got to look and figure it out. So, usage would be, either metered kilowatt hour or billed kilowatt hour, whatever you choose. That's pretty straightforward. The cost is bill total, column I in my utility bill. So you got column F or G and then I. That's a pretty question. The end date is going to be your read date, but you don't have a start date. But what you do have in your utility bill is the number of days represented by that meter read date. Okay, and so we can work with that. And so what we want to do is subtract those days from the read date and use an Excel formula that looks like this. We're going to have to modify it a little bit. And then just be aware that Portfolio Manager is very sensitive to column formatting. So you want to use paste values when you copy data, and you want to change the start date column format to a date format, and then in this case I had to make sure that it was not just any date format, but it was an 8-character date format. So double month, double day, double year with the forward slashes in between. And that was very important that it be just exactly like that. And then, and I've switched this template here, put it on the bottom, just to make it more challenging. But and so you can see that the bill data went right into usage, the bill total went right into the cost, and then the read date went right into the end date. And then here's the result of using this formula in that A column on the template. And you can see that I took the read date minus the days, and I had to add +1. And the reason is because you can't overlap. So if you look at the end date of the previous bill, 6/08/15, I can't have 6/08/15 as also the starting date of the next bill. So I just add one more day, 6/09/15. Okay, so just a little quirky thing that it's very important, as it won't work if you have overlapping dates. So, poll question here: what's the first step before you enter meter data the very first time? There's 4 choices here. You're looking at this sheet right here. This is what it looks like. Wow, what's it asking me to do here? What's the very first thing? I have this meter data. What do I got to do the very first thing? There's 4 choices there. I'll launch that out and give that a shot, and we'll take a look at that. So I was able to put all that data in the template, and then I went back to here and hit the choose file. And you can see the meter name there. The default name is pretty long. It's meter consumption data spreadsheet underscore metered underscore en for English, I suppose, .xls or whatever it was. And you go find it, and wherever you put it, and you upload it. For, in this case, the electric, I chose electric meter for that data. And I did the same thing for gas as well. And then once you upload it, you hit Save Bills, and you've populated your metadata. And so you can see, I gave a peek at it earlier, but now this is what it looks like. So for every month, you've got that month's data, kilowatt hour usage, the cost. You can put in there whether it's estimated or it's green power. You can change any of it. If you think, hey, this is an error, for whatever reason, you click on the left-hand column. You can go in and modify any of those numbers. And then you have to, again, hit Save Bills. It's assuming you might want to make some. So whenever you go to a page on here and you look at the bottom and it says Save It, just hit Save It. Keep yourself out of trouble. All right. So the very first step is, you guys, most of you nailed to add a meter. You got to add a meter before you can enter energy data. Simple as that. I just showed the gas here as well. What's interesting here is, and you might find this in an electric bill, my read date didn't have any forward slashes, and that's important. Again, it has to be very, you have to be very strict about its format. And so I had to do a find and substitute and put in, with some trickery with Excel spreadsheet, and put in those forward slashes. It didn't require an 8-digit format. It had a 4-digit year, and it's accepted it just fine. So if it works for me. So, and I did the same calculation because it gave the number of days here as well. So I used that same formula for gas as I did electric. All right, and when you did that, and if you do all these tips, and if you have a pretty simple facility, it might take you an hour. You're rewarded. You get a score, and you get a summary again. And now the summary, it has the same metric summary, but now there's data in it. It says, what's my baseline data? And now it's going to default to the oldest data, but you can change the baseline to anything you want. what's my current use, and then what's the change from current to from baseline to current. You can see here that over time, my score, my source and site performance, and emissions all had poorer performance, but my energy costs actually went down. And so, and we happen to have a score that was based on, and this was based upon 2003 data when I did this a year or so ago. Now, I'll show you that there's been an update to that, and it made a big difference for me anyway. And so if you look further down on that summary, not only will the data be in the table, but it'll be in graphic form too. You can clearly see that things have, emissions and energy use has gone up, and then kind of started going back down again. And again, if you have 10 years data, it'll be a lot more significant plot, be more visually useful to you. If you go to the Goals tab, this is an interesting tab where you can set up what you're trying to, maybe some goals to achieve, and you can track that against those goals over time. It also gives you energy performance, source and site, to kind of look at that. And this little table here that's on that goals page is very helpful because that last column there says median property. So if you're wondering, well, why did I get such a good Energy Star score? Well, I mean, the median's 50. The source EUI at KB2 per square foot is 225, and I was in the 120, 134 range, so quite a bit lower. It makes a lot of sense. I should get a good score, and so on. So there's a lot of good data, emissions data, to kind of give you a feel for what's average or median, and well, how did you do? I found that very, very helpful. And then if you hit the reporting tab, now you can say, well, I want to kind of take a closer look at all this data. I just put in there many years of data. And there's 3 sections here. There's the graphic image at the top. That actually is kind of like on a lazy Susan. As you cursor over it, it'll rotate and bring up another piece of information, which I'll show you what that is here in a second. And then there's a performance documents. We'll take a look at that as well. And then there's templates and reports down below. So they have some default templates, for instance, energy performance. And I went to that and I said, I want to, and I chose download current report in Excel. And it gave me, the performance over time for all the years of data I had. So it's pretty easy to get that kind of a data. If we go look at the top of those charts, you can see it's defaulting here to source EUI, including generation and transmission. It has site EUI. It has weather normalized source EUI, weather normalized site EUI. Has total greenhouse gas emissions intensity. It has energy cost intensity. How much do I spend per square foot? And so it'll automatically give you some data. I think I showed here. Here's a very instructive comparison. I did the site EUI report, and it said, over time, from my baseline to my current year, I'm up 5%. But when I looked at the weather normalized comparison, it showed me that my baseline actually went up a little bit. My current usage went down, and really I was pretty flat. And so the site EUI that's not weather normalized was impacted by the weather, adverse weather conditions. And so you can see it makes a big difference to look at weather normalized data versus regular data. And then when you look at on that rotating chart selection tool at the top of the page, you look at greenhouse gas emissions, and it'll show you that as well, baseline versus the current. And I was up a little bit here. What's really interesting to me is if you have multiple properties, you can kind of sort through those and look at what's the average by property type. All my offices are this much, and my warehouses were this much, or my other buildings were this much if you are a real estate type company or something. So, or you can look at greenhouse gas emissions by state or province. So you can slice and dice the data pretty easily once you get it in there. And then up in the right-hand corner of that same page, reporting page, and reporting tab, it has about 5 selections. And it's a energy performance selection. It says, what's my design intent performance? Here's a verification checklist. Here's a goals report. Here's a scorecard. So I chose the very first one. If you want to get a Energy Star certification, then you need this first one. And if you check on any of these, it will generate this page here that says select which of these 5 you want. And I selected the first one, performance, well, the energy performance. And which properties do you want it for? Because if you have multiple properties, it doesn't know which one. So you tell it. And what kind of time frame? Do you want the current year, baseline year, whatever time frame you want? And then who's this really going to? And it says generate and download reports. And when you do that, you'll get something that looks like this. And this is the statement of energy performance. That's what that line there of the 5 documents says. And it gives you kind of a big 30,000 foot view of what your performance is. And this is where it would be verified by a certified person, particularly a professional engineer, for instance. And they'd have to have their stamp to submit this for certification. Another useful item, it's actually the third one down, is the data verification checklist. And it's interesting that they kind of put it here in reporting at the end, but it's kind of a double check again, and it says, hey, is your indoor air quality meet ASHRAE standard 62? Does your thermal environment meet ASHRAE standard 55 for temperature and humidity combinations for summer versus winter? Do you have adequate illumination? Illuminating Engineering Society of North America Lighting Handbook, numbers in terms of the illumination. And then it goes on. It's about 7 pages, about 4 pages of questions like this, and it kind of double checks some of the data you entered. The gross floor area. Hey, is it really 7,800? Did you count atriums once? You don't count it for each floor, just the ground floor. Did you really, do you have the right number for a number of employees and some things like that? So it's a very helpful checklist to make sure you got all the data correct. So, and then it says, now that you have a number, what does that mean? Well, if you score pretty poorly, 0 to 25, you're really going to have to invest some in upgrades and some capital. There's just no way about it if you're that poor. If you're, less than average, but not the worst, and certainly some capital investment, but even some commissioning to make sure that everything that you have existing is performing as you'd expect. If you're average to just under that certification level, then more so the commissioning, make sure everything's working, some capital investment, and of course if you're outstanding performance, 75 score above, you want to submit that for recognition and then just do continuous commissioning. And then at the top here I show an interesting phenomenon. When I did this a couple years ago, it was based upon 2003 data. And in 2016, they brought in new data. They'd skipped, actually do this every 4 or 5 years, and they skipped a year because they had corrupt data. You got to appreciate that. At least they didn't publish bad data. And then, so it's been a long period of time, 10 years between then and now. Now they're up to 2012 data from 2003 data, and they're re-scoring everyone. Of course, the population of buildings have generally increased in energy efficiency. And so it brought our score down. Still at certified level, barely. And so a lot of people who've done this in the past are seeing this effect, and it's due to the fact that they've updated, done more statistical sampling, buildings are more efficient, and so your comparison baseline, your average or median, is a lot better than it used to be. So scores are going to go down. They go down by various amounts depending on what kind of facility you have. So, all right. Last poll for today. How valuable has this webinar been? There's 5 choices there. Really appreciate you working on that. And as you're doing that, let me just share a couple lessons learned here. As you're going through, you're putting in data. Don't feel hesitant to flag it as temporary. You're not quite sure what that number is, your exact square footage, your number of employees, number of computers, etc. As we said before, hey, make sure your meter data matches, that you set up is going to match the data that's coming in from your template or outside source, kBTU or whatever it is. And if it's gas, it could be therms, could be 100 cubic feet. You got to get that right. When you get utility data, make sure you got the costs in there. Make sure it covers an entire calendar year. This is very critical. I stumbled on this. I had that second line there in my data because the January bill was January 7th through the February 4th. Well, I didn't have all of January. I'm missing 6 days. And so I had to go back in and put another line in there of data. It happened to be for the previous year's December bill, but December's bill covered the first 6 days of January. So again, word to the wise warning here, make sure you have, for every year, an entire calendar year of data. Make sure there's no overlap of dates on your start date versus bill date. Make sure your formatting's correct. Use all the dates, use the same date format. When you put data in from your Excel spreadsheet to the template, use paste values, make sure it's clean data, and then make sure to hit Save Bills whenever you upload or enter bill data. It's just a little thing at the bottom, and it doesn't stand out that much, but it's really critical that you do that. So, all right. If you want to know more about this whole process, there are several resources, useful resources out there. There's if you're a federal building, there's federal guiding principles checklist. There's a 5-page guide how to apply for the Energy Star if you are achieving that 75 score or better. Then there's other printed materials like how to perform an Energy Star treasure hunt, because you want to get your building as most efficient as you can, and that's very helpful. Also, there's some tutorials, 101, 201, 301 level, covering different aspects of what I just covered today, and those are all available for download with those links, but they'll offer those on a pretty regular basis as a live webinar as well. You can ask questions or attend their monthly office hours sessions. I attended quite a few of these when I was doing this. It's every other Wednesday at noon Eastern Time. You can just sit in the background and listen to what other people's questions come in and how they answer it. You can ask your own questions, etc. So it's a real helpful tool to get the most out of Energy Star Portfolio Manager. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason to talk about Indiana Michigan Power's energy efficiency programs.
Well, thank you, Mike. Again, another great webinar in our series here. I hope all of you that have participated have found this very valuable. As you all probably heard the quote, you can't manage what you don't measure. So this is a great tool to help you understand your energy use and then apply some management decisions to improve your energy efficiency. And when you do that, we do have energy efficiency programs that you can take part of. whether that's lighting or HVAC or motors and variable frequency drives. We have a program that can help meet your needs and offer an incentive to do so. So I encourage you to go to electricideas.com/work, and you'll be able to download all of our latest applications and fact sheets for our programs. Mike had mentioned providing data to the program Energy Star portfolio, and if you do need some historical data from your electrical energy use, I would encourage you to go to electricideas.com and also contact our program office, and that's 888-444-9085, or you can email im.energyefficiency@lmco.com. And all those are available again on our electricideas.com website, the contact information. So if you would like some of your historical data to use to create your Energy Star portfolio, we'd be glad to provide you that data. Again, thank you to Mike Carter. You've provided a lot of expertise today in our previous webinars. And so I encourage you all to go to electricideas.com. We will have this webinar posted, and as well as the other ones are posted right now. So you can view the historical webinars and review them as needed when you go to create your Energy Star portfolio account. So again, thank you. If you have any questions, we would be glad to answer them. And I'll turn it back over to you, Mike.
Hi, Jason. I have a question here about, are all the segments available for certification today? And let me go back to the slide that had all those segments here. Yeah, here it is. Oops. Yeah, here we go. Sorry. Live view here. Yeah. And so again, yeah, the ones that are not asterisked, they will be eligible for Energy Star certification, have been in the past. Now, as of today, there is a delay in releasing some of these segments for certification based on the new data that's come in. And so they're doing analysis to make sure that the new data and the new scores are correct and that there's robust data behind that. And so they're slowly releasing almost month by month now. Now you'll even see a schedule. So if this isn't released yet, in the next few months they should have almost all of these released, so to speak, for the new data in terms of certification. And so there is some delay in that, just slightly for right now. It was a huge change from data that was 10 years old, 2002 actually, to 2012. And so it's made a big impact on scores, made a big impact on getting everything released for certification. So that's for sure. Let's see if there's any other things here. Let's see here. Yeah, there's a question about the normalization of things like employees' hours operation, number of computers, which I talked about before. So yeah, that's you could have two facilities that have fairly different number of employees, number of operations, hours of operation, number of computers that have the same energy consumption. They say they're the same size building, they have the same exact kilowatt hours and CCF or therms of gas consumption, and they'll have a different score. And why would that be? That's because of the portfolio manager is smart enough to take into account number of employees, hours of operation, number of computers, and so and even weather, of course, if they were located not side by side, if they're located in different states or something. And so it really is a powerful tool, and it really tries to be as fair as possible to score a facility. And so if you have the same energy consumption, but you have more employees, longer hours of operation, more computers, hey, you're going to get a higher score than the building next door that's exactly the same size but has fewer employees, fewer hours of operation, fewer number of computers. And that makes sense. And so it does take that into account. So let's see. I don't see any other questions. We just got a few minutes left here. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Levi for some closing comments. Thanks for your attendance today.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all for attending our webinar today. As a reminder, presentation materials and the playback link to the recording of today's webinar will be emailed to you sometime within the next couple of days. If you have any additional questions or feedback, please do not hesitate to contact us. Thanks again for attending, and have a great day, everyone.